and I'm just seeing whether we can. Why is it not going live on LinkedIn? Okay. Let's see if we can sort this out. Hello, everybody, and welcome to another Wow Ergonomics. It's Friday. It's just about midday. And Stephen, how's your week been?
Good, interesting. I was down in Swansea yesterday, somewhere I've never really been for work before, at a local business exhibition. But that was really interesting to sort of connect with lots of local business and organisations in the Swansea Valley, sort of South Wales area. So that was really, really good, actually. Really interesting. I had a good day.
It's a nice drive down to Swansea, I find. It's, you drive, that last bit particularly, you drive right down by the coast.
And who knew? I mean, I didn't know this and maybe should have done. Who knew Swansea had a beach?
Yeah, I did. Yeah.
You see, I didn't. How do I just? You get this preconceived idea that Swansea industrial manufacturing area, and you go there and there's a beach, and it's like I just didn't connect the two things. You just make assumptions sometimes in life.
That's because you've always driven past it.
Yeah.
Further into Wales, isn't it? Yeah. For anyone that's done that, and you've gone along the M4, and you've driven past, and when you get to you do sort of Port Talbot and Swansea and whatever, and you just see all of this industrial stuff on the left hand side if you're coming from the Bristol area, and you get to that big bridge bit where it goes down towards Swansea, and you think, oh, it's all factories and stuff. But if you do ever take the time to pop in there, there's some very nice bits of Swansea. I used to go to Swansea University. Not to study,
yes,
but to meet the people at Swansea University. Very nice.
Huge university building. And then when you get down where we were, was sort of at the Swansea Arena. Fantastic. I think they hold a lot of gigs and concerts there. But the front, the marina, fabulous area. Spent a lot of time and money on it. Looks really, really good.
There you go. You see, so the first thing to learn today on Wow Ergonomics is that Swansea's a lovely place. And you should perhaps go there and investigate further. Today, we're going to be joined by the wonderful Olga, who's about to come and join us on the screen. And I will press the button to do that, and then she can come and introduce herself. So, Olga, thanks for joining us.
Hiya. Hi, everyone.
Hey, Olga.
Hey. Since we will be talking about health and safety today, so maybe I shall start to say where I have some knowledge about it from.
Yeah.
I worked in various departments in the office for over 20 years, and at some point I became health and safety representative. So that's how I learned more about health and safety, and obviously now I'm doing my counseling and psych therapy. So some of the knowledge that I've learned working in the office and doing health and safety role, I kind of use in my practice. So hopefully this conversation will be useful.
Yeah, thank you. Tell us a little bit more about you. Where are you from? What got you into this whole sector in the first place?
Oh gosh, long story. So as I said, I worked in the office and in different departments in various local authorities mainly, and I've seen different practices and what's useful, what's not so useful, and yes, because I did my first training. Oh gosh, actually, my original education was in psychology, so that's where I learned more about stress. And then I did a little bit of social services, and then I did my counseling training and psychotherapy training, and I've learned how everything to do with mind and body interconnects and how one impacts on another, and they're constantly influencing each other. So when we're looking at one, we must look at another, and vice versa. So otherwise it's not going to be fully well done job.
Yeah. Everything's
And Graham, that
interpolated.
ties in with the whole thing we talk about regularly about ergonomics, doesn't it? Around how the fact you can't just look at individual parts in silos. You need to look at the whole thing together. And we talk about, we're really talking around the physical workplace, and we're talking about the desk and the chair and the accessories. But it is true, you can't just look at one without looking at the other three, four or five components that make that up. So it's really interesting that it isn't just the physical side, it's also the psychological side, where you need to break it down and cover all those different things, and not just focusing on one, is to say, if you do this, this will remedy it. It's lots of different factors sort of interconnected, isn't it, that helps address and alleviate those problems that people are maybe experiencing.
Absolutely. Now, Olga's got us completely organised today. Thank you, Olga. So with that, we are actually going to show you now what we're going to be addressing today. Okay, so look at this. So we're going to start with something that we actually don't do enough of perhaps on this show, which is to go back to HSE, which is Health and Safety Executive, for people that don't know what their acronyms are. And why should we use acronyms? Because it's really complicated and it confuses people, especially as they're different in different industries. But we're going to go back to HSE, and we're going to look at some of the key stats with Olga, which will be great. And then we're going to also look at why workplace stress should be taken seriously. I mean, anyone that thinks it shouldn't, needs their head read. But we're going to have a look at what sort of impact that's having on the economy and the long-term consequences of that. And then we're going to get really into understanding work-related stress. So that's good. And we will cover within that some of the legal responsibilities of employers and employees today as well. So thank you for organising this for us, Olga. It's really, really great that you've done this for us today. So let's start right at the beginning there. Key statistics from HSE. I gather you've gleaned some. You've put some together for us.
Just very three of them, which I think are the main ones, because statistics are produced by Health and Safety Executive every year, so it's quite useful to look at it. Some of the things never change, like the most stressful industries. Those things never change, I think, unfortunately. And everything to do with statistics, sometimes they go up and down, but very briefly. But so I will mention the ones that I think are appropriate for this topic. I did write it down, so I don't make a mistake, okay?
Oh, she's just gone. She's just disappeared.
And we're all desperate to know, what were those statistics?
I know.
She's left us hanging.
I know. Apologies for this. We'll see now whether we can get Olga back in. Maybe she's just had a little bit of a blip on the old internet. Yeah, I think here she is. She's coming back.
She's back. There you go.
We lost you.
Sorry. I moved the paper and my cursor moved and everything.
Do you know what? The best bit of it, though, was that everyone was on absolute tenterhooks waiting for those stats. So it was great.
I'm so sorry. My mistake.
No, it's all right. We covered. It was fine.
Yes. So, and 23-24. So the first one is 1.7 million work-related ill health issues reported, out of which 776,000 were linked to stress, depression, anxiety, whether it was new or long-standing. So it's quite a big figure.
It's almost half, isn't it? Almost half, Olga, was down to that.
Yeah, half. Somewhere in between. Yes. Then 33.7 million work days were lost due to work-related ill health and injury. Injury is quite important because when we are stressed, we're more prone to injuries, whether it is at work or at home. And statistically, actually, we're more prone to be at risk to injuries at home, the safest place. But because we're so stressed, and it's the most common environment, and we still get ourselves injured. So at work, the risk goes higher. So next one, the third figure, is 21.6 billion pounds It's the annual cost of workplace injury and work-related ill health per year.
Absolutely crazy.
21.6 billion. So roughly, it goes up and down a little bit here and there, but it's quite a lot. So that's why health and safety is involved. So it's not just about health and safety for the workers; it's to do with the money. Although I'm not sure how annual cost. I think it's probably just purely to do with the workplace. But actually, if you think about it, if people become unwell, then there is an implication into NHS and benefits, and the cost can go quite long and high.
Yeah. No, absolutely.
It's interesting when you start reading those statistics out. I don't know, but I sort of visualize this number, and it's just got lots of noughts, and it's a very long number, and that just sort of, it always visualizes the size of the problem is almost to the length of the number and the number of zeros. And I think when you start talking about billions and millions, it's a long number and there's lots of zeros, so it's huge numbers, huge.
Yeah. Yes, and that's reported, but there is a lot that is not reported, isn't it? Because unfortunately, stress is not really talked about a lot in terms of responsibilities and how it affects people in detail. So sometimes people will say, I have, I don't know, it's easier to say maybe I have a cold or a flu than I cannot cope anymore. So.
Yeah, I mean, you're right there. I mean, how many people does that stress actually not then manifest itself in terms of days off work? Or, maybe some people throw themselves into work because of the stress as well. They're stressed because of work, but then they throw themselves into work. So they're not having days off work. But it'd be fascinating to look at it against other figures, which I wonder whether anyone's ever done that. Look at it against things like maybe, divorces every year.
Interesting, yeah.
Do you know what I'm saying? Or anything where somebody breakdown of relationships, full stop. Because that's when people throw themselves into the work to to solve that problem, or to try and deal with it. They're not dealing with it. Then quite often it's going to ruminate elsewhere, isn't it?
Yeah, so in my work, I look at kind of 4 pillars or dimensions, depends how you call it. But it's about impact on physical health, impact on, obviously, psychologically, on the level of social interaction or relationships, that can fall into that. And spiritual, because when people lose faith in I don't know, God or spirituality or whatever that is important to them, and that could be due to exhaustion and burnout. It's quite a dangerous stage, because people can be suicidal at that point. So it's quite,
Yeah.
Because the word we talk about, Graham, or we've used a lot when we talk about sort of workplace ergonomics, is sort of presenteeism, which is what you sort of alluded to there, where we think about, or I always think about it, is how many people are so presenteeism is when someone is actually present at work, but not able to sort of function to their expected level. And you always think about that from a physical perspective, don't we? So how many people are going into work but are in some sort of pain, whether it's back or neck or shoulder or whatever that physical pain would be. But it's interesting what Olga was saying there, and what you mentioned is start turning that presenteeism to look at people who are actually in work but are under and suffering from stress, but maybe could be out of loyalty or financial necessity, are sort of forcing themselves into work. So they're there in body, as it were, physically, but not maybe they're unable to function in their role. So presenteeism could be huge on top of that. We talk about how many days are lost, but as you say, how many days are lost but aren't being recorded because someone's physically present but not able to sort of do their job.
Yes, when people are experiencing a lot of stress, it becomes difficult to focus, remember, learn, and actually create, be their best, really. So people are not as productive as they could be. And there are many ways that things can be changed or made it easier, but doesn't always happen.
And I was also fascinated there in terms of what you were saying about the link between stress and injury.
Mhm.
So is that just sort of that's physical injury? So if I get stressed in the office, what's the causation of that? If I get stressed, why am I more likely to get injured?
Because we're less attentive to
right.
to environments, because we could be so wrapped up maybe in symptoms or in our thoughts. We're not paying attention to what's going on around us maybe as much. So when we're crossing the road, maybe we don't do it as safely as we could. Yeah, so it's one simple example. And of course, again, when we're too stressed, we don't notice certain things, so we might overreact, and that can actually cause psychological injury, because we might end up in big argument, or that could be traumatic, or we might not be as careful with some people or some situations, so it might end up becoming bigger than it needs to be.
There's also that thing that some musculoskeletal disorders as well, are actually, if you look at the root cause of them, they're more linked to something called a cumulative trauma disorder. Yeah. So actually, if I start to get really tense, for example, in my neck and shoulders, and my muscles are always constantly in a state of tension because I'm stressed, I'm more likely to start to experience problems within my arm and my wrists and whatever from overuse because of the tension in those muscles. And it leads down through the body. So, it's a bit like, if you're in a car and you have an accident, if you're in a more relaxed state, you're less likely to break things. It's the same kind of impact. Yeah. If your body's constantly in that kind of tense state, you're more likely to injure tendons and muscles, etc., because you're in that tense state. That's right, isn't it?
Yes. And then the stress can be experienced in different ways. Sometimes it could be not psychological stress, it could be not cognitive stress or mental stress, depends how people look at it, although it's part of the same. But it could be just wrong posture or sitting in one place for a long time. Psychologically or cognitively, people might not think, oh, I'm stressed, but the body takes it as stress because the blood doesn't flow as it should. The muscles stop working as they should, and then the body experiences a lot of stress. So that's why it's important to move around so the blood flow is restored, and that prevents the injury, long-term physical injury, including musculoskeletal one. So it's mind-body interconnection. So unfortunately, if people are living in a life which is stressful, whether it is to do with work or personal life or both, people sometimes stop recognizing the signs, and then they just think they're not stressful, but the body is arguing, and people will only start paying attention when the body is screaming, and that could be already injury, musculoskeletal disorder, or physical injury when you're crossing the road incorrectly, or it could be an illness, heart problem, or a flu, because our immune system comes down, isn't it, when we're stressed for too long. So in one way or another, the body speaks to us. It just we're not always able to recognize it because we think the mind is more important, that can control everything, but it's not. So one influences another.
What's really interesting here, Stephen, is I wonder, let's take it back to HSE. You look at like the template on HSE for like risk assessment around DSE, display screen equipment. And there's nothing in there. I can't recall there being anything in there about stress. Now, if you're doing a risk assessment, but you're not assessing the risk of stress, and stress leads to injury, right? Surely you've missed a whole bit of the equation out. Do you not think?
I think so. And I think the more times, the more time we've engaged with people who are sort of workplace assessors, and some of the people we've had on the show, Graham, and some of the people we sort of liaise with on a day-to-day basis, I'm pretty confident that that's something that they're doing. Speaking to people, they are looking at beyond just those, how are they sitting, what's their screen height. I think they are working beyond that. But as you say, a lot of it comes back to those sort of regulations, and that's often been something that's been pointed at those regulations as that they're slightly outdated and they're slightly narrow in terms of their sort of frame of reference is very narrow around those things, where I think what people are maybe doing now from an assessor perspective is actually doing the right thing, is taking it beyond that themselves, not maybe relying on, well, I've got checklist A over here. Okay, there's some really good points in there, but actually I need to add B, C, D, E, and F to that checklist A to make it more of a complete assessment. Otherwise, I'm missing the point. I'm sort of addressing a physical element, but there's other things that play a part in what could be leading to those physical ailments and issues that people are experiencing that Olga's been talking about.
Yeah.
Mm.
And that means, Olga, that, people need to, in the process of sorting this out, also need to make sure that they've got the right professionals on board as well to provide the support, right?
Yes, yes. Well, I think the biggest problem in workplaces is that the workers don't know much about stress and how it affects them, or actually that HSC is there to support them, and actually there is a legal responsibility for the workers as well as the employers. The employers themselves don't promote it or don't look at it seriously enough, or don't they don't. A lot of the time, people are not even reactive enough, let alone proactive. So ideally, it would be good if there was something preventative, but it's I'm yet to see the place that does enough in that area. So both parties don't know enough about HSC and why it's there. And the rules and the support that should be in place, and why it is so important, unfortunately.
It's very definitely like a lottery, because some organisations are really great at this, and some organisations still aren't.
Do we have any numbers, Olga? There that you were saying about the lost revenue, and we talked about the number of days. Do we have anything specifically by sector, but also do we have anything that compares the UK versus other similar countries, like maybe a Germany or a France or something like that? Is such a data available that you can do a comparison to see almost in the league table, as it were? Where does the UK fit? Are we good? Because we talk about this 21 billion and the 1.7 million, but actually, does that look really good or really bad against economies of maybe similar size and similar development? It'd be interesting to know if we can ever get our hands on that to go, are we doing a good job, or are we doing a bad job, or are we doing the same job as everyone else?
Well, I know HSC does statistics, I think, on different industries and different illnesses. So they do compare and contrast usually, but they don't produce anything in comparison to the others. And I haven't looked into it, but I've heard different things about different places. Like, for example, I've heard that in Germany, they're quite good at health and safety, but that could be in some specific industries rather than across. So I don't know enough about it, unfortunately. Yes.
No.
I'm just looking it up. Apparently, there is some data available for anyone that wants to go and do a bit of homework afterwards from Eurostat.
Okay.
And Eurostat apparently shows that the UK's historical performance is favourable compared to countries across Europe with relatively low rates of work-related fatalities, injuries, and ill health. And that is available on. Oh, here we are. I've got some actual up-to-date data from 2020 from Eurostat. So how we sit on that. In fact, let me see if I can screen grab this and then share it with everybody, because
I think it's always good when you talk about these things to sort of understand that we could be doing a very good job, and it could be that maybe that number is a big number, but it will always be quite a big number.
Here we go. Look at this. Here we go.
Here we go.
So here we are. Percentage of workers suffering from a work-related health problems resulting in time off work in various countries. And as you can see, at the top of the list, there's Poland. Wow.
Okay.
Not doing so well.
So we're sort of in the bottom,
we're here.
bottom half, and the average is about, what's the average? Is that EU 27? So 4.7, is that the average there, Graham, would you say?
Most of France, Netherlands, etc., is around sort of high 4s to 5s.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're quite low.
It's interesting looking at the countries at the bottom. I was sort of thinking, trying to think sort of, is it maybe because of the type of industries they are, maybe the type of sort of locations they have in Europe as to why they would be like that?
Well, certainly Bulgaria, Malta, Greece. I mean, they're quite laid back countries, and they've got nice sunshine and nice beaches.
Well, but I wonder. I know you're saying that, and I know you sort of, there's an element of flippancy about it, but actually, you do wonder. I wonder if climate has a part to play. I wonder if it's just the general demeanor of the people, the sort of the culture of those countries means that actually things that maybe would stress people in, say, Finland at the top of the list maybe wouldn't stress someone who lives in Malta or Bulgaria who's towards the bottom of the list.
Well, actually, it's an interesting point because in Britain, there isn't enough sunshine, isn't it? So people are quite low on vitamin D, and that actually does have an impact on people's psychological well-being and physical well-being. And sometimes people are not aware of that. And whatever the body feels uncomfortable about is stressful for the body. So if we are, for example, dehydrated, we cognitively don't think we're stressed, right? But the body experiences a stress, so it already starts functioning differently. The same goes for vitamin D. If we don't have enough of that, the body functions differently, and we end up with the results of it. But cognitively, of course, we're thinking we're doing fine, but until we start doing not so fine, and we don't necessarily know why we're not doing so fine. So you never know. So it could be to do with the weather too.
But again, going back to the point you made earlier as well, Olga, in this country, we probably adopt a stiff upper lip, and we probably don't tell people when we have got a problem. We probably just carry on, right? You know, we had that as a whole campaign about 10 years ago. Remember, keep calm, carry on. Posters everywhere, and that's what we're like in the UK. Whereas now, you see, we seem to be performing on there much better than the Dutch, who are brilliant in terms of producing solutions for workplace wellness. But the Dutch are very direct, as are the Germans.
Yeah.
So maybe they just tell it like it is. So I'm ill, I'm not coming to work.
Yeah. It could well be, couldn't it?
Yeah. This is fascinating.
But then again, if we look at Poland is at the top of the list. But Poland's winters are much harsher than they are in Britain. So it could be statistics to do with car accidents, because the roads can be slippery, and in spring the roads can be quite tricky as well, again because of the transition from winter to drier weather. So you never know what it is about. Yes.
Yeah. We're diving into some great data today.
Yeah, absolutely.
We don't often dive into data enough, but there we go. Hope you're enjoying the deep dive today. Right, so we're going to go on to this subject. So why workplace stress must be taken seriously, because otherwise it's going to have an impact on the economy.
Well, it's an economy, it's productivity, as we mentioned, and people just don't function at their best when they're stressed. And again, it needs to be looked from both sides. People need to be physically comfortable at work, meaning they have to physically move around so the body doesn't feel so stressed. And psychologically, they need to be comfortable. So, things needs to be managed on various levels there too. Productivity, economy, and of course overall well-being of people, because as we get older, unfortunately, we become more prone to illnesses, meaning long-term illnesses, which if they have an impact on people's functioning, everyday functioning, means it's disability. So, and then we're going back to economy again. But considering that the budget gets cut, like in social services or local authorities, so I think in the future there will be less available for people to cope with those illnesses. So the idea is to prevent as much of that happening as it can be, really. And as we know, the stress is something that affects every single cell in the body. So if you think it starts from the brain, so if we're stressed for too long or the stress is too intense, that means our memory gets affected, our focus gets affected, short term, long term. And then everything else, like everything to do with our heart, our cholesterol, our bones, even they become not as strong because of stress, prolonged stress. So blood flow, because if the blood doesn't flow very well in the body, then it just doesn't function very well, doesn't recover very well. Obviously, our muscles don't work as well. And if our muscles don't work as well, then it affects our bones. So everything has an impact on everything else, really. So stress is something that impacts us on physical, psychological level, social, spiritual, and of course, it's not just ourselves, it's everything and everyone around.
Yeah, we're kind of coming on to this bit as well with that, which is understanding stress. And it's part of the problem of stress that, unlike a physical manifestation of a condition where it's like, I've broken my hand, I've broken my leg, I've got a tendonitis in my wrist or whatever, where it's can be seen, the physical restriction of the body can be seen. Is it quite difficult because stress is like, someone could say they're stressed, but from a management point of view, how do you know they're stressed?
Yes, it's a tricky one for the managers, I guess, but that's why when we look into HSC, they say that there is a responsibility for the employers and employees. So ideally, it is about collaboration and working together about how to first eliminate stress where possible, prevent or manage it in a way that is suitable for every individual if it's possible, because at the end of the day, we're all different. For example, if someone has got disability or let's say some kind of trauma, whether it is childhood or adulthood, the ability to cope with stress will be different. Or maybe someone's personality, for example. We can be introverts or extroverts. So if the managers or organizations are pushing everyone to be at work 5 days a week, well, it's great for extroverts because they get the energy out of it. But that means the introverts are the ones that are suffering. So you're not going to get the most out of them. It's just they're going to be drained. It's just simple as that.
That's really interesting, because what I was thinking was, Olga, something I think we touched on a couple of weeks ago, Graham, wasn't it? Was when we were talking about organizations sort of requesting or requiring people to sort of go back into the office more. You do wonder how much stress that's going to actually start creating, because it's for people who've maybe for organizations never worked in the office, they've always been at home, that requirement to come in. I wonder if we'll see an increase in sort of stress levels in those organizations who are suddenly saying, right, when we mentioned them, haven't we, there was people like JP Morgan, they'd all got to be back in the office from 5 days a week from the 1st of March, and Barclays and other people were ramping up the requirement to be in the office. I want it to be really interesting within those organizations whether you could actually track what's the impact been on stress and stress related absence. Has that gone up? Has that requirement to their physical place of work changing had an impact on stress and stress related absence within their business? So, and equally, I wonder what they're doing to put resources in place to help address those? Because that must be something they'll be thinking about, is that's okay, we've done this, but what impact is it going to have? So I wonder what resource they're actually doing, if anything, to sort of address those sort of issues that may come from that requirement to change where they work.
Well, that's why ideally, when it comes to stress or any risk or any hazard, that's why HSC is saying there is a need to assess, because things change all the time. If the person is young and they haven't got health issues and they haven't got many triggers, is one way of coping. When we're aging, unfortunately, that capacity decreases for various reasons. As I say, health, or it could be other stresses or whatever. So, it needs to be changed. So it's about assessing, putting measures in place and reviewing it as the time goes. It cannot be the same all the time, because as we age, our priorities change. Okay, 10 years ago, someone liked they're doing, now they're bored, and when people are bored, that's another level of stress, or not level, type of stress, because they need some stimulation, right? So they need to be maybe trained or doing something else so they can be motivated and not be bored. So things need to be monitored and changed and reviewed. So that's an ideal world.
I think that the other difficulty in here is, I think as we go through life, we put into place in our life different things that are important to us. And those different things that are important to us, be it work or family or our extracurricular activities or whatever, right? The more of those things that we have and the more responsibilities we have in different areas, it's the interpolation between those different things that quite often causes the stress, because we've then got to try and balance how I'm going to make time from me as a person to give to each of those different areas in what I see as an equal measure or a reasonable measure. But then it's the case that that's not necessarily received by each of those different areas in the way that we want it to be received. So I might think I'm giving enough to work, but then work might go, no, I want you to give, I don't see that you are, I want you to give more. I might think that I'm doing a great job as a dad or a husband or whatever, and I might be told, no, you're not, you need to do more. And the stress builds because we get pulled apart as a person by each of those different things. I mean, honestly, if we could literally just go, all I'm going to do in life is sit here and do this, and I'm not going to touch anything else, we'd probably be fairly stress-free. But we don't, because we fill our lives with experiences that are better for us in one shape or form, but even great things for us bring us stress as well, because we've got to balance everything else out, haven't we? And I think this is the problem for managers, is that they aren't just managing the risk of that they deal with work. They have to manage the risk of, when it comes to stress, they have to manage the stress points in a way that are life as well for that person. Yeah. And yet, is that really a commercial concern for them? What that person does at home or in their spare time, or whether they've got to go and pick the kids up on Wednesday and look at their books after school, that doesn't kind of sit commercially anywhere for that business. And yet, if they're not concerned with it, they know that that's going to have an impact on that person. That's the difficult thing, I think, for businesses. Do you think?
It is difficult, but I think the biggest problem is that the managers don't even know they have to manage stress. In a lot of places, everything is pushed onto the worker. And if the organization is not supporting an individual, the individual will find another way. As I said, they will suddenly become unwell with flu or cold or whatever other illness, whatever, because stress is not recognized as something that that is actually a problem. So a lot of the time, as I said, the workers don't know that there is support, or there should be support, and the managers don't know that they have to do something about it. That's the biggest problem. That's the biggest challenge. And of course, even if there are some policies in place, people don't even know where to access them, or what to do with that, or where to complain, or where to speak up. So because obviously people will become concerned about the consequences if they do speak up, because a lot of the time the responsibility is put on the worker, and that's it. And people don't know that it's not actually right. Unfortunately, there are places when people go for interviews, the questions around stress are asked in the way that is definitely from the start putting all the responsibility onto the worker, how you manage the stress and this and that. So it's the balance that is not right, really.
We've had some great comments, actually. I just bring a couple of these up. As people or business owners, we're not machines. We are not human doings, but human being. We are not indispensable. I think that's a really great point. And Andrew, our friend Andrew Shepherd, he's said stress was covered in a recent course he attended. So it seems to be getting out there that people are covering this a bit more.
What does a good stress program look like from a commercial organization? Are there any sort of examples, Olga, that you're aware of where a company has done something and it's worked really well that other companies could sort of look up? Are there any good sort of reference points or things you've heard, whether it's tricks or tactics or approaches that have worked really well to help reduce stress within an organization?
Well, I just know from my work with clients that I've heard of good examples where the managers can sit down with a member of staff and do what needs to be done, like literally assess, put the measures in place and review it and see how things go. And it gives everyone almost not motivation, but it's something to strive for, someone that the worker becomes interested in. They see the support and they want to perform well, so everyone benefits from it. Yeah. But it's quite rare. I've heard that it can happen in some charities or some places where mental health is considered important. But otherwise, I think, unfortunately, in some other industries, even in NHS and education and local authorities, the ones that should be given example or leading by example, unfortunately, that's not the case. Yes, they might have health and safety teams, but what that team does, how to access it, how to use it, no one knows really. So it becomes very difficult. Yeah.
I know Stephen's dying to ask his favourite ever question now.
Oh, now what was that?
Which is,
go on.
Is this a money thing?
Oh,
is it? Yeah. Is the reason that this not happening everywhere? Is it due to money, resources, or is it due to? I mean, I feel like I understand that managers need to get involved in this process, but then again, I feel sorry for managers because I'm pretty certain that managers are not resourced or trained, etc., to be able to deal with this either. I mean, how many managers have any kind of awareness of stress themselves to be able to sit and talk to someone about stress in a professional manner?
Of course, yes, they would need to have some training how to assess stress and how to put measures in place, and they need to know about their responsibilities as well. So it needs to come from the top, really, whoever is at the top of the organization and health and safety team, if they have those teams. But the money is always there as a question, isn't it? So of course, all this will require resources. But as we spoke from the beginning, it started from the money, isn't it? We talked about statistics and the money. So yes, it might not. And I think that's where the problem is. People are just looking into their wallets and their budgets, and they don't understand that if they're not doing something, it will have a knock-on effect on something else. So in one way or another, the money will be paid somewhere. It's which pocket and which budget is going to come out of. That's an interesting question. Yes. So sometimes, like, for example, local authorities will sit there and say, oh, we need to be careful about the budget, blah, 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 blah. And then they're not going to do what they need to be doing, like managing the stress and so forth. And then it's going to have a knock-on effect on NHS and people ending up unemployed and needing benefits, and going back to the same local authority asking for support that it could have been avoided in the first place.
Yeah. Oh, so many times it all goes round the wrong way.
Yeah, Olga, so it's funny. Yeah.
Olga, you've been great today. I just wanted to kind of finish on today asking how can businesses out there listening to this, how can they utilize you? What is it that they can come and ask you to help them with?
Well, I do run on Saturdays. I run currently. I will change it in summer. I do run separate webinars on workshops on stress, burnout, negative thoughts, anxiety. So I do that. I will be changing it. And obviously on individual level, people can look into things. So obviously on individual level, people can take steps, because we can't prevent all the stress, right? So in one way or another, we might end up being stressed. And there are measures that people can take, but for some people it can be harder than for others. For example, ideally would be good to have boundaries in place, because if boundaries are not in place in the workplace, it does create stress. But for some people, it's easy to put boundaries in place, and for some people, it's not. And that's when I do my therapy, and that's when we look into unconscious processes and we learn how to put that in place and maintain it. That's a different subject altogether. So things can be approached on different levels. But yes, I can do workshops, webinars, and individual therapy. But things need to be approached holistically, as I said. Yes, people can go to therapy, but they can put measures in place by learning about the boundaries, saying no, and be proactive and time manage. But if they go back to the workplace that is toxic and they don't feel safe, physically sometimes as well as psychologically, it's not going to resolve the problem. So ideally it needs to be done from both sides, as I said, organization and individual as well, because individual, even under health and safety, has a responsibility, legal responsibility, to bring up what they consider to be a stress to them. And then the organization must assess and put measures in place. But it needs to be collaborative work. So it cannot be responsibility on one without another.
That's brilliant. You've been absolutely brilliant today, Olga. We would like, as a kind of thank you for coming on today, afterwards Stephen will connect with you on LinkedIn and chat with you, and we will get you some, as a little token, we'll get you some pieces from Backer Elkhuizen over to you.
Oh, lovely.
Right, to kind of help with your own ergonomic situation, and you can talk about those with anyone that you meet, that in terms of obviously posture, etc., does impact on stress, and vice versa. Today's episode has been fantastic, hasn't it? I mean, we've covered so many different stats and pieces of legislation, etc. today. It's been marvelous. So thank you so much for coming on and doing this for us today, Olga, and thank you for watching and listening. We will be back in 2 weeks' time. We're now on a 2-week schedule. It gives us an opportunity to really push this out there, and we will be making some clips which Olga might want to share as well on her profile from today as well. If you'd love to appear on here, you've got something to say, and you would like to come and talk to the community about what you're doing to promote well-being within your organisation or how you're making a difference, do get in touch. You can catch up with previous episodes of this at wowergonomics.com. So say we'll be back in 2 weeks' time. But until then, from Olga, Stephen and myself, thanks for joining us today. Bye for now.
Bye.